Hello, welcome to Mandela Effect Equals Knowledge. This channel is hosted by myself, Dale DuFay, and again, I thank you for watching. We're going to use Google Earth to go over some variations and differences that are very obvious in this reality. Now, we got to keep in mind that these changes are not, that we perceive as changes are not. They couldn't happen overnight. And so we know, for example, I brought this up in a previous video. We could see it clearly here in Google Earth, but we can see the boundary line here of Chile. Here's Argentina, here's Chile, but we can see that Chile comes way further south by maybe even 100 miles. Let's check. Than Argentina. It's just amazing when you think about it. Let's see. We won't even count those little islands there. About 50 miles, over 50 miles further south than Argentina. Now, even on most of these Orion Dwarf Earths and well, we know there's many realities, and each reality has us there and also the Earth, of course, but there's going to be variations and differences. But on these Orion Dwarf Earths, there's always, at least Argentina is the furthest south. It always is, especially even on the Sagittarius super Earth. So we know that this boundary didn't change, and they didn't, Chile didn't take over some of Argentina. But in every reality, Argentina is the southern tip of South America. And some of the realities, it even comes way down here like this. You can see on the ocean floor off the coastline how we kind of recall the configuration or the shoreline of South America. We could see it up here, for example. This is one of the areas that really caught my attention when the Mandela effect first started recurring, because in a lot of the realities, this flat part in Peru on the west coast was predominant. Now, I recall in the reality where this portion of my soul originated on the Sagittarius super Earth, that South America, the coastline was very consistent, like we see here on the ocean floor along the coast. We could see that everywhere. But this is one of the things I first noticed with South America, is this flat area. And of course, that varies considerably sometimes and subtly, other times from Earth to Earth, reality to reality. Now, again, this, the Mandela effect's obviously revealing that there are many Earths, and they're all in the Milky Way Galaxy. I mean, we have to keep in mind that there's plenty of room in this galaxy for millions of Earths. In fact, they're just realizing that many of the stars we see out there have our solar systems, and many of the planets, at least one of the planets in every one of these solar systems is in the Goldilocks zone, like all life Earths have to be. So, so why not all of those? Many of those have Earths around them with us on them. Think about that. The Mandela effect's revealing that. It's revealing this parallel existence, but it's not dimensions that separate these realities we have. It's the distance, very, vast distances. I know the reality where this portion of my soul originated is at 75,000 light years from this location, possibly even more, because the astrophysicists in this sector of the galaxy in these realities have a much dimmer view of the galaxy as a whole, whereas their counterparts that are sharing their soul on the outer reaches of the Milky Way Galaxy have a much better view. That's why we see the differences in the artist's rendition of this galaxy, the Milky Way. Because we have to keep in mind that these, again, even astrophysicists are realizing that there's a possibility of Earth-like planets in the millions in just this galaxy alone. So there's plenty of room for all these realities to happen within this galaxy, but we'll never be able to intermingle with other realities in any other form other than what we're experiencing here with the Mandela effect. We'd never be able to meet up with any of our other replica versions of ourselves that have been sharing our soul in other realities. It's impossible because of the vast distances involved. And again, science is, vindicating that, realizing that there's no boundaries when it comes to quantum entanglement. There's no boundaries. I mean, they're realizing that doesn't matter if they split an atom or a proton and see its reaction being identical. If when they do these experiments, they experiment on, they split one and they make the one half do something, the other half does the exact same time, instantaneous, and it doesn't matter how far apart they separate it. And they're realizing that it could be light years separation, and it doesn't. It's instantaneous. Of course, when we're dealing with tens of thousands of light years, these vast distances, then there's bound to be a delay in our reaction. In other words, if we do something, our counterpart, a replica version of ourselves that's been sharing our soul since the day we were born, some 75,000 light years from here, is going to instantaneously do the same thing. But there's going to be a delay when it comes to these distances. That totally explains why virtually everybody experiences deja vu at some point or another in their life. So that really explains that, if there is that slight delay. Those replica versions of ourselves that are doing what we're doing, and they're doing what we are doing, and vice versa, there's going to be a 30-second delay, maybe 5-second delay in some cases, maybe even 30 minutes, who knows. But the fact is there's always versions of yourself behind you and ahead of you at all times, in your reactions and everything you do in your life. But this is the one thing that really, I used to have a channel, Terra's of the Milky Way, that I had Google trotting videos, but this is the first time I've noticed that Chile is the furthest south of South America by 50 miles. I mean, by Argentina. That's crazy. I mean, that really struck me as amazing. And not only that, the Chile is very, very narrow east to west in this reality as well. It's like a sliver. And it's almost like it's compensating by taking over, by having this region of South America, and being furthest south. It's like a compensation, if you will, a quantum compensation. That's a kind of a new word, if you will, a new phrase, quantum compensation, compensation. And we go over that in videos about jet lag and things like that. Again, the Mandela effect and what it's revealing with our parallel existences in the same dimension explains why we have jet lag as well. All of us experience it. I know I have. I never experienced it driving, of course, but it only happens on jets. There's a very good explanation for that by what the Mandela effect's revealing. And then we'll go over some other variations and differences I noticed. Australia's always one. Look at the great Australian Bight. It's way, way up. It's very pronounced, plus very irregular and scalloped, like everything on these Orion Dwarfers. All the coastlines and all the continents and countries are very scalloped. But we can see the Bight is very, and some of the realities, even on these Orion Dwarfers, the Bight is more like this, like we see on the ocean floor along the southern coastline here. But it comes way far north. It has this protrusion here. And Kangaroo Island always exists in every reality, but it's always in a different location. I remember it even here in some of the realities in this area. But here it's almost attached to this peninsula here. But again, it's Kangaroo Islands in every reality, but it's always a different location. Again, there's no way it can move 100 miles overnight. That's impossible. So what else could it possibly be? We're on a completely different Earth that we were always on. Think about that. We know we were always on it because here we are. It's amazing. And then there's no other explanation. Think about it. Again, everything else, other explanations are absolutely impossible. There's no way these things can change. Of course, the Earth does change because it grows and at an infinitesimal rate, but it does indeed grow and eventually change. This Earth will eventually look like the Sagittarius super Earths we recall, but that's going to take hundreds of millions of years because as they do grow in age, they obviously venture out from the galactic center to the tip. And that tells us that the galactic center is the source of all matter in the Milky Way galaxy. It's not a black hole consuming matter, it's a white hole that's creating matter. And all the matter it creates ventures out the galactic arms. In a great deal of time, those Sagittarius super Earths are probably hundreds of millions of years older than these Earths, these Orion Dwarf Earths. Again, the Earth growing explains why we have earthquakes. It's not the Earth recycling itself, and it's constantly growing. That's why, in fact, I just heard there was a small earthquake in northern Indiana. I remember when we were growing up in Chicago, there was earthquakes from time to time, and the only explanation they had for them is they were rebound quakes from the massive weight of the glaciers during the Ice Age. But I mean, come on, you would have think that the release of the weight of those glaciers eons ago would have been rebounded by now. But of course, again, the Mandela effect's revealing, because we know there's super Earths, we know there's dwarf Earths, we know what does that tell us? That the Earths grow as they age. And of course, geologists are not going to accept that. They think that this Earth has been this size since the day it was created, and that's not the case. These Earths were all very, Pangeic and very small when they came out from the galactic center. So again, this Earth will eventually look like the Earth we recall, and we won't be able to witness it ourselves because we know the northern hemisphere twists eastward as the Earth grows as well, and that would straighten up the peninsula of Italy here, as we recall, many of us recall it, straight up and down. And the Mediterranean Sea will expand and be much larger, as we recall. The United Kingdom will be orientated this way, as many of us recall, instead of this way. I mean, here it's actually, here we're true north, but we could see it's kind of veering northwest. And I recall it being like this. And again, it'll happen on this Earth. And, that's what's interesting about the Mandela effect. We get knowledge from what it's revealing. We know the Earths grow. And of course, there were geologists that postulated this back in the 30s, German geologists. And of course, they were shunned. But we could see that this is probably where the continent of the continent of Antarctica will start and form on this Earth, because we know many of the Sagittarius super Earths have a continent on the North Pole called Antarctica. And speaking of that, let's measure this Earth. I know that most of them are 24,800 miles in circumference. Most of these Orion Dwarf Earths. I haven't even I'm measuring this with you here as we speak. Let's see if it's, and of course from 90 degrees north to 90 degrees south, it'll be 12,400 miles. Let's see if it is here. Yep, pretty close. Yep, yeah, pretty close. So this is yet another 12,400 mile from 90 degrees north to 90 degrees south Orion Dwarf Earth. They've all been this size. I'm anxious to see if there's any smaller Earths than this, because again, this is amazing how small this Earth really is. I mean, it's incredible when you think about it. And all these Orion Dwarf Earths, there is definitely very, very small. And that's why we can, we could see that, again, as the Earth ages and the northern hemisphere twists eastward, it'll line up the Americas, like many of us recall. Here's another thing that amazes me is just how small the Yucatan is. It's just, and even on some of these Orion Dwarf Earths, it's much larger. And here on the Sagittarius super Earth, I recall it being about this big, again, like we see on the ocean floor. And of course, on a more straightened out Mexico and straight Central America. Of course, that'll happen. I recall even one of these Orion dwarfers. I don't keep track of them anymore. It used to be Terra B, I called it. Panama, the Isthmus of Panama was straight across, horizontal, and it made the canal go plumb line north and south. But we carry on this in this reality and many of the previous ones. There's a big kink in the Isthmus of Panama, which causes the canal to literally go, from northwest to southeast direction. In fact, there's even a part in the canal where it goes straight east and west. Like many of us recall it, the canal went plumb line east and west, but that's because the Isthmus of Panama was more like that, straight up and down, which made the canal go east and west straight. Again, it was straight like this, up and down. But here we could see it's like, if you look at the compass down here, it's almost like 25 degrees off. Here we're orientated, but that's one of the amazing things, and we know as the Earth grows, this will all straighten out. We know it because we witnessed it. We were on an Earth that is much older than this and much more mature, if you will. And those are, were upwards of 60 some thousand miles in circumference. I totally recall that. I don't know the exact miles of the super Earths, but they were at least twice as big as this, 3 times bigger than these Orion dwarfers. In fact, they were so huge, you could only see, you could actually see the continent of Arctica and the continent of Antarctica and both Americas at the same time on the face of those Orion dwarfers. But here you can only see, these are so small, you could really only see one full continent at a time. Isn't that amazing when you think about it? That's how small these are. Look at on this face, you can only see Africa. It's just incredible. Of course, Saudi Arabia and part of Europe and Asia, but not like we recall. And here, totally only could get Asia, and that's it. That's crazy. And then of course the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea are always in different orientations, and look at it. It's just amazing. There's always in this part again. Many of us recall the north coast of Africa being consistent, but again, even the early realities visits that this portion of my soul had with replica versions of myself that also carry portions of my soul. Again, all your replica versions of yourself sharing your soul are experiencing the same thing you are. They're experiencing the Mandela effect just like you are. There's the version of your soul that was in this replica version of yourself could perhaps be 75,000 light years from here on those Sagittarius super Earths, experiencing the same thing you are, but in a different terms, of course. I'm talking about how this indentation here is in Africa, and that portion of my soul in the replica version of myself that this portion of my soul originated from is saying the exact opposite. They're looking at Africa with a consistent north coast and recalling it being like this. And I'm looking at this saying I recall it with a consistent north coast, And of course, way further spread apart, these continents. Europe was further north. Of course, there was plenty of room, and the Mediterranean Sea is huge in those realities. It's amazing. Same with the Red Sea, huge. And of course, many of the Sagittarius super Earths do not have a white sea. Here's a white sea right here, which is remarkable. You got to sometimes coax these things to come out. There it is, white sea. Isn't that amazing? And of course, Scandinavia, I remember totally different in the reality where this portion of my soul originated. Denmark was actually part of the Scandinavian peninsula here. It was part of it, part of Norway, Sweden. I think it was in around here. It might have been in between. But I remember it was on the coast, actually, to be honest with you. Because I looked it up. I remember, there was interest in Denmark for some reason. And I looked it up. And I remember it being, in this Scandinavia area, and this is always predominant on every Earth and every reality, but it's so different in every. Again, it can't change. There's no way these things can change, especially overnight. So that things are not changing. We have to keep that in mind. It's just simply different. We're in a different reality. I know it might seem confusing because you're in a literally in another replica version of yourself that has always existed. We know that because again we're here. There's too many things that are very obvious that everything else is impossible, and so whatever is left is improbable as it may seem. Is this improbability that who would have ever dreamed that we have who knows how many replica versions of ourselves that were born the same day we were, that have been sharing our soul, my soul, or our soul since the day we were born. Think about that. How improbable that is. But it's not impossible, obviously. It's because, that's the only thing left. We know, again, who knows? The astrophysicists are finally admitting that, yes, there are billions, perhaps, of Earth-like planets out there. How many of those are Earths with us on it? It's amazing. And that's what this quantum shifting aspect of what we're experiencing with the Mandela effect is totally revealing. That's why we see these differences. Things, some drastic, but most of them are very subtle. A lot of these Orion dwarfers are very they're almost identical. And that's the thing we have to keep in mind is even though this Earth is a quarter, maybe a third the size of the Earth you recall in the reality you originated from, these little Orion dwarfers are still unusually similar. Again, by that I mean if you came into any of these Earths from any reality from space, you would have to admit, wow, that's planet Earth. You see continent of Africa, it's undeniable. In India, I can't get over how small India is here. I remember it being much larger as a whole, very large. But it never came to boundaries here in this reality. They come way up here across Bangladesh, way here. You can see it coming way over here. So again, that's probably compensation because in the reality I recall, India, just its boundary lines were along the Himalayas and down through, border line with Pakistan and things like that. That was all they had. They almost went like straight across, as I recall. But the Himalayas were kind of shaped different because of that. But it never came, up like this, and it does in these realities, of course, because again, they have to compensate for their huge population. They have a population issue in every reality. Again, because every one of these civilians have a parallel existence. All life on Earth has a parallel existence, including, obviously, the Earths themselves. It's amazing. And that's what the Mandela effect is revealing. Again, I'm going to stop keeping track of the Earths. It was well over 80 on the previous channel that I deleted. I just wanted to get a fresh start with all this, but I'm not going to count the Earths anymore because I don't think that that's important. What's important is what the Mandela effect is revealing. And that's what we should focus on. It's revealing that our souls are splintered and fractured into multiple portions, and each portion is in a replica version of yourself. There might be some realities where something happened to your family history or your own history where you don't even exist, and that the soul portion that was supposed to be in that reality is in that reality's spirit realm, if you will, in limbo. It's amazing when you think about it. That's why some people are more keen to extra perception and things like that, and are more able to see the future, and because there's portions of their soul that they're able to tune into, because we have to remember that we're constantly connected on a subconscious level with those other portions of our soul, constantly. That's why we all need REM sleep. It's essential, crucial, and science and medical, they just don't know why we need that and why all life has to have REM sleep. That's because all life has a parallel existence with a multitude of replica versions of themselves on a multitude of Earths throughout the Milky Way Galaxy. And they all have to be, when we are experiencing REM sleep, which again is essential, that's when all of our soul portions are in synchronization. Think about that. That's incredible. And this is something that has never been known. And that's what the Mandela effect is doing, revealing things that have always been yet never been known before. Think about that. That's incredible. And it's revealing just how remarkable life is, and especially us human beings, because that's basically what this is about. It's only going to be us humans that are experiencing or being able to understand what we're experiencing with the Mandela effect. Uh, the Earth may be even experiencing it. Who knows? That might be why the Schumann resonance is acting up so much. The Earth's heartbeat, if you will. They could be experiencing the Mandela effect as well. It's incredible. I mean, think of what it would take and how many times this has happened in human history. My guess is never. This is the only time in human history. There's no record of any civilization having knowledge of a parallel existence, because even they did. Think about it. Even the dinosaurs had a parallel existence. Everything. There's fossil evidence in every reality. So we know that all life since the very beginning has this parallel existence and is very essential, apparently. Think about it. If we didn't have these other replica versions of ourselves in this quantum connection entanglement, we wouldn't even be able to breathe. Do you ever wonder why we do things automatically, like breathing and things like that? It's because of that quantum connection. Did you ever wonder why, like in races or in traffic, why there isn't more accidents than there is? Again, that's that quantum connection. It's a miracle. That's why things happen. That's why we humans do the things we do. That's why life is like it is. It's because this quantum entanglement, this connection that has always been. Perhaps that's even the black matter that science is trying to figure out, that astrophysicists are trying to figure out. What is that? That's that quantum entanglement that binds everything together. It doesn't matter how far. It doesn't matter if it's 100,000 light years from here. It doesn't matter if it's 250,000 light years from here. It's connected constantly. And again, no doubt the galaxies are even, quantumly connected. But this channel, like my previous channel, we'll just stay within the confines of the Milky Way Galaxy, because there's plenty of room in here to experience what we're experiencing. I doubt if we shifted to another Milky Way Galaxy, I believe this is the same galaxy, simply because we're in another completely different sector of the galaxy. We're literally only 25 to 26,000 light years from the galactic center. That would have seemed like an impossibility. It would seem inhabitable to us in our other realities, because it's too close to the galactic center. Even Michio Kaku talked about how we couldn't live this close to the galactic center. It's uninhabitable. But the same replica version of his self has been seen in these realities saying the exact same thing about the outer reaches. We couldn't live out there. It's inhabitable. It's to be a frozen wasteland out there. But we know that we are out there. Those of us that are experiencing the Mandela effect know more than any astrophysicist on Earth, because we, by experiencing the Mandela effect, realize that the entire Milky Way galaxy is habitable. Now, there's not an astrophysicist on Earth that would admit that, because they wouldn't know unless they're experiencing the Mandela effect. Only those of us that are experiencing the Mandela effect can see all these different realities and these same individuals. It's amazing to see another replica version of people with most of them still have their original soul portion. That's why to them everything seems the same. And that's why to them, they look at us and think we're crazy and that we lost our memory and we're going nuts and things like that. But that's not the case at all. Those of us that are experiencing Mandela effect are getting knowledge of what life has always been and creation. It's very important not to take creation out of the equation when it comes to the Mandela effect. And we can do this without being theocratic or religious, believe me, because this is a highly spiritual matter. And again, this gives us more knowledge of spirituality than the Pope himself. Think about that. or any other religious organization or leaders on the face of the earth in the history of the earth. We have more knowledge of spirituality by experiencing the Mandela effect than anybody on the face of the earth. Again, the Mandela effect equals knowledge. It's as simple as that. It's important to realize that. And once you realize, you have to, you know, if you're feeling this way, all the other replica versions of yourself that are experiencing the same thing you are, with whatever portion of your soul that's housed in them at this moment, are feeling the same thing, or you're feeling what they're feeling. So, you know, it's important to realize that, stay positive about this, and look at the Mandela effect for what it really is. It's remarkable what it's revealing. And that's what we have to keep in mind. It's not this sinister thing that those dark forces want us to think. This is a very, very incredible, you know, here we are on another beautiful Orion, Dwarf Earth, a little jewel. A lot of people think it's so different. They're homesick and things like that. Don't be homesick, because you have to. This is your home. It's always been your home. It's just that you're in a different reality that has always existed, that has always had you in it. It's amazing. So look at this as another beautiful jewel of a earth, one of God knows how many. And again, I'm just saying that as a, you know, there is obviously a creator, but you know, we don't have to. You know, I'm not going to even get into the religion, of course, or politics, because religion is, you know, the Mandela effect's revealing that there's no such thing as a true religion, or especially a one true religion. But again, it's just amazing how you can only see, you know, one continent at a time. And then this, you know, usually the whole side of the earth, you could see nothing but the Pacific Ocean on this side. But on this reality, you could see quite a bit of the west coast of North America, and quite a bit of the east coast of Australia and New Guinea. And some of the realities, you don't see, barely see the coastline at all, just like total Pacific Ocean. But here you can see quite a bit. You know, again, that's a, you know, a simple variation. It's not. It hasn't changed. So what does that mean? That obviously we're in a completely different reality that we have always been in. I also remember Sri Lanka being on the southern tip of India. Here it's in this reality, and like many other realities in this sector of the galaxy, on the inner Orion arm or Orion spur, depending on what reality you're in. This close to the galactic center, Sri Lanka, many of the realities it's in, you know, up around here. Some of them it's down here. But I remember, of course, many of you do as well, it's being right on the southern tip, kind of like Tasmania here in Australia. But this, again, this is so narrow. The Tasmania is very narrow, east and west in this reality. Narrower than even some of the previous ones in the Orion dwarfers. We've been kind of in this sector of the galaxy. I know I have for about 3 years now. But in most of the realities are virtually identical. But we see variations and differences in things around us. Some very, very subtle. But we can look at Google Earth and we can see that we have shifted into another reality. I mean, I could see it here. This east coast of Africa is very different here, along with this west coast. Madagascar is always very similar. I want to see if this reality has what I believe is Atlantis. Yep, this one does too. I believe this is Atlantis. That's why we're not finding it, because it's in the Indian Ocean. And it makes so much sense that it would be, because it's not far from the equator. So during the Ice Age, this would have been in a temperate zone and above water, because right now this is not that deep in this area. We could see there's even the Seychelles Islands here, and this is a platform that used to be a continent, no doubt, the continent of Atlantis. And there's the harbor right there. You could see the entrance coming in, and canals going around, and this crescent, you know, the circles. It's incredible with the bridges and everything. So, you know, and I believe these to be the pillars of Hercules, because during the Ice Age, we have to keep in mind that the Earth was tipped like this, you know, about 23 degrees or whatever, and this would have been coming straight west into the through the Pillars of Hercules, like Plato described, and then boom, right into this incredibly huge, beautiful harbor. If this is not Atlantis, it certainly was something very similar to Atlantis. But again, I argue, why not? Because here and it's actually closer to Egypt, because it would have been easy to get from Egypt to say this with Atlantis and India as well, because that's another thing Plato wrote about, is Atlantis had elephants. Okay, so what are the two continents that have elephants current day? India and Africa. So, it makes so much sense that this is, and again, that's why we're not finding it. It's in the Indian Ocean all along. And of course, they talk about going through the gates of Hercules, pillars of Hercules, so everybody assumes that it's this, the Strait of Gibraltar, which is in every reality. And then of course the name Atlantis, everybody assumes it's in Atlantic Ocean. During the time of Atlantis, the Atlantic Ocean probably wasn't even named. They probably named this ocean after this continent. That's amazing when you think about it. Because again, this is pre-Ice Age era. Plato talked about it being very ancient. It was even ancient to the ancients. All this, but it makes sense that this was obviously a continent during the Ice Age and before the Ice Age, and that there were elephants here between the two continents that have elephants now, the subcontinent of India and Africa. So there you go. These Orion, I never would have spotted this on Sagittarius Super Earth, but these Orion dwarfers are so revealing. There's lots of things on these Earths that show that they're very ancient. And again, that's one of the paradoxes. A lot of the antiquity and ancient things look much older on these Orion dwarfers. And we know from experiencing the Mandela effect that these Orion dwarfers are much newer. The Earths are newer than the Sagittarius Super Earths, which are much more older. But yet things on those Sagittarius Super Earths, the same parallel things in antiquity, look much more pristine. Like, for example, King Tut. I just saw his mummy in a documentation yesterday, and I just cannot believe how tattered it is, like it should be. But on the Sagittarius Super Earth, his mummy is almost pristine in comparison, which would make his tomb seem younger on an older Earth, where here it's older on a newer Earth, and there lies the paradox. That's what I find most intriguing about the Mandela effect, is the paradoxes. And there's paradoxes in time and everything. And speaking of time, and many of you heard me say it many times, that the Mandela effect is revealing that time and space are indeed irrelevant. Of course, they exist, but they're irrelevant. We know this because of this, on these Orion dwarfers, the time is literally 50% faster. Because I had that cadence, for my own personal stop watch. I had timed perfectly. It took me years practice, and I had it timed. I used a 1/1002. I had to time it. I had to practice and force myself to slow down because I was always going too fast. I know why now. I didn't know then that I was constantly connected with other replica versions of myself on realities where the time is 50% faster, and that replica version of myself was practicing the time, a personal stopwatch himself at the same time I was. So he was probably forcing himself to speed up, and I was forcing myself to slow down. It's interesting. But I did have it perfected. I even worked on it, with times, lightning strikes and things like that, even as an adult and everything. But after finding this portion of my soul, the one that I was born with, the one I always have, in a different reality where the time is faster, I could use my personal time stopwatch cadence, which I perfected. With this portion of my soul perfected, it doesn't matter what replica version of myself I'm in, I still have what this portion of my soul had perfected. So I do the cadence, and it's literally 50%. By the time I hit the cadence that I have perfected, when I hit 10 10 1000, 15 seconds have passed in this reality. So that's literally 50% faster. And I'm sure that my counterpart, the replica version of myself where this portion of my soul originated, which no doubt has, you know, a portion of my soul from one of these replica version of myself this close to the galactic center on Orion Dwarf Earth, who is now on a Sagittarius super Earth, is experiencing the same thing. He's doing the cadence much faster that he perfected, but he's in the replica version of myself that this portion of my soul originated from. And he's on an Earth where the time is 50% slower. So he's realizing that he's on an Earth that's, has much more time on its hands. But yet the time remains the same. But that explains why things are more pristine, perhaps, on those Sagittarius super Earths. That's why backdrops and scenes and movies are much more elaborate and well done. And I see this in all the movies. I pay close attention. I used to always pay close attention to the backdrop and things like that. And they were always really well done in the realities on the outer reaches of the Sagittarius arm. Because they have more time out there. That explains it. But here, they still have the same constraints. They still have the same timing. They still have to make the movie an hour and a half long or whatever. But they have less time. So they have to cut corners. They don't cut corners for economic reasons. They cut corners because of time constraints on these dwarfers. But the movie still gets done, but you're going to notice the variations in differences in the backdrop. That's why we see these differences. Of course, we're even going to see differences in the script. My favorite one is Moonraker, James Bond. Polly doesn't have braces here, but yet she had them in the super Earth realities, and that's because they were bred or quality. She was even supposed to wear the braces in these realities, but she couldn't because they were too uncomfortable. But she was able to wear them in other realities where there was more time to perfect the braces to make them more comfortable for her. Think about that. These are things the Mandela effect is teaching us. And this is something that we really have to keep in mind, just the importance of how incredible and miraculous this Mandela effect really is. It's not this sinister, bad thing that's all made out to be. Of course, we have to realize that there are entities and opposition forces that do not want us to realize what exactly the Mandela effect is revealing. That's why there's so much confusion and this misdirection and people barking up the wrong tree when it comes to the Mandela effect. It has nothing to do with those, the only thing that could be causing what we're experiencing in this incredible Mandela effect is the Supreme Creator. It's as simple as that. Only the Supreme Creator has the power to manipulate our soul and to have it jump in a blink of an eye 75,000 light years. Think about that. That means our souls encompass the entire Milky Way Galaxy. It's incredible what the Mandela effect is revealing. It's not this sinister, bad thing. That's not something you should feel homesick about. It's something you should feel privileged about because there's not that many people that are experiencing it when it comes down to the big picture. 1% of the population, maybe. So that's another reason why the people around us don't recognize it, because they're not experiencing it. They still have the original portion of the soul their soul that they were born with. So to them, everything is exactly as it should be. And they don't understand the variation or things that we see different, that we perceive as some things changing, which they're not. Again, you're just in a reality that you always existed in. I know that seems confusing, but there was the portion of your soul that was in this replica version of yourself knows this reality very well. But that portion of your soul is experiencing the same thing you are by being in another replica version of yourself somewhere here in the Milky Way Galaxy. I know there's still the replica version of myself in the outer reaches of the Sagittarius arm, nothing happened to those Earths. I mean, that's another thing. That's the Mandela effect is, misdirecting. Uh, People are getting misdirected and thinking that those Earths are gone, and they're not. They're still there. The only thing that may be happening to them, some of them, is they're calving off. Because that's another thing the Mandela effect is revealing. It's totally against the Big Bang Theory, so there's problems there. As the galaxies calve, they don't collide. Uh, you know, so that could be what may even be instigating the Mandela effect. Is the Sagittarius arm is calving as we speak and taking Earths with it, but they're not destroying them. We know the Earths ain't getting destroyed. Because of whatever happens to these Earths is going to happen to those Earths. And whatever happens to those Earths is going to happen to these Earths. So these Earths are still here, so we know those Earths are still there. There may be, something might have happened. Again, getting calved. We don't know exactly what's going to happen to those Earths as the arm calves, but the fact is for the most part, all the Earths that have been created since the beginning are still here. The Earths are being created as we speak. The galactic center is not taking a break. It's constantly creating matter. So how many Earths, brand new Earths, are there? Are those the new Earths that are spoke about in the Bible? Again, we can talk about the Bible and things in it. I believe it's a book of clues myself. But we can talk about them without being religious and theocratic. But it does talk about new Earths. I always wondered what that was about. Of course, that was when we all assumed that there was only one Earth in the Milky Way Galaxy. But we know now that there are many, and they're still being created. So obviously, those are the new Earths, or Earths that John talked about in Revelation. It's incredible. So what the Mandela effect is revealing. So what's going to become of all this? I think it's all ushering in a very, positive time for humanity. So it's something to really look forward to. But I wanted to, go over some of the variations and differences in this reality that are quite obvious. Again, I'm going to stop keeping track of the Earth. It's just got too much. Besides, I could be wrong. I was always worried about being wrong. Are we really on another Earth? Are we really in another reality? So I always want to be really, conscious of that and be very conservative when it comes to this. But this is obviously another totally different Earth and another totally different reality and another totally different location on the inner Orion arm or the Orion spur of the Milky Way Galaxy, depending on what reality we're in. You can look it up in, anywhere the Milky Way, and they'll show that we're on the Orion spur. And many of us recall being on the Sagittarius outer arm. And, the Orion and the Sagittarius arm are one of the same in these realities. Well, in the Milky Way Galaxy, it's just incredible when you start thinking about, we'll just stay within the Milky Way Galaxy here. I know it gets deeper than that, this quantum entanglement in the universe and whatnot. But I mean, look at this, just amazing. South America is always so different. The coastline and everything. But it's always there. I still can't get over Peru being in the Eastern time zone. It's incredible. Those people down there, it must be really disorientated for anybody in South America and on the West Coast that's experiencing the Mandela effect. They're probably going, Eastern time? Didn't we used to be on Pacific time? Think about that. If somebody was experiencing that. But what that reveals is that there's, these people that with their parallel existence, they have replica versions of themselves in a totally different time zone, some 4 hours difference. So that must be, difficult for them to achieve REM sleep. If you think about it, that must be why they always have to nap down there. I mean, it's amazing because they have replica versions of themselves that are in a completely different time zone, not to mention on an Earth where the time is 50% slower because it's larger. again, I come to that conclusion. It's simply, it doesn't matter what size the Earth is, they're all spinning off their axis at the exact same speed, just like the Milky Way Galaxy as a whole is. And we have to come to that assumption because there is obviously a time difference. So what is it? Obviously, the Earth's and every reality spin at the same speed. So with humans making time and making the time zones, and the Earth's revolution, being the same speed, the smaller the Earth, obviously, the faster it's going to spin its one full revolution, which makes a 24-hour day. So that, of course, that would make the time faster. And the Sagittarius super Earths, then again, doesn't matter how much larger they are. They're also spinning at the same speed as these Orion Dwarf Earths, the exact same speed. But because they're larger, it's going to take much longer for a full 24-hour revolution off its axis. That's why it's 50% faster. Think about it. Isn't that cool? What the Mandela effect's revealing. But again, I can go on for hours. Uh, I always feel like talking about the Mandela effect. There's no one really to talk to about, because again, most of the people around us still have their original portion of their soul that they were born with. And they're certainly not going to believe us, because they're, they've been institutionalized about being a single Earth, and a single reality, when nothing could be further from the truth. And of course, they're not going to see the variations and differences that we see, because they're in their reality they originated from. So that explains that. Again, this is this theory is pretty sound. Every argument is answered by this fact that we have a multiple existence, parallel existence on a multitude of Earths in the same dimension. Even residual evidence. A lot of people will say, well, what about it? Residual evidence. I mean, I can go on for hours about that. But residual evidence actually proves the point that we have a parallel existence. And I can go into great detail about that, and for videos and down the road. I mean, I've done videos about them before on the previous channel, but again, like I said, start fresh and start going over everything again, and it's showing just exactly what the Mandela effect's teaching us. And it's not, of course, me teaching you. It's the Mandela effect teaching all of us. It's the answers are out there for everybody to see. And I don't know if those of us that are affected were picked by, chosen for, experiencing this, or if we were randomly picked by happenstance. And that makes more sense, no doubt. It's a random group of people that are being affected, and it's very difficult to talk about, again, because most of the people around us are not experiencing it. Thereby, nothing's different, nothing's changed. But those of us that are experiencing this quantum jumps into other realities, along with all the other portions of our soul, again, it's very obvious. Every version of yourself had to have a soul, and every version, I mean, at least in my case, every replica version of myself that this portion of my soul has been privileged to enter has been identical to me. It's not like I'm going into an alter ego version of myself, or all these different personality versions of every version of myself is identical. And I know this because nobody's looking at me and saying, have you changed? You changed, I am the same person in every reality, just like most of us are, no doubt. Of course, there's going to be some that are not. They're going to experiencing more drastic variations and differences. But in my case, I haven't. Every reality is identical, regardless of what size the Earth is, or what, Again, there's probably more people that are experiencing incredible differences, like, say, a person that goes through the Panama Canal on a regular basis. Say one of those, the helmsman or the captain of a certain ship that goes through the canal regularly for decades. Say they recall the reality where the canal goes straight east and west. And then they find themselves in a version of themselves where they assume everything's the same, and they approach the canal And not only did they not going east and west, see, this is the Atlantic side. I know it's confusing. And this is the Pacific side. But you come in and you got to go straight south for a little bit. Then you go east. You know, and you're wanting to go west, but you're heading east, and then you're trying to tell your crewmates and everything what's going on. Is the compass broke? Here they're going straight east to get to the Pacific Ocean. Look at that. And then southeast out into Panama Bay, which again, you know, is the Pacific Ocean side. So if somebody was experiencing a Mandela effect that goes through the Panama Canal on a regular basis, and they have been for decades, and they find themselves in another reality and go in the opposite direction, do you imagine? That's got to be crazy, what they're experiencing. And they can't say anything because everyone around them is going, what are you talking about? It's always been like this. You know what I mean? And of course it always has been in this reality. And that helmsman, captain, or whoever maybe experiencing it, goes through the canal all the time, you know, that they in this reality have always known the canal to always be like this. but could you imagine? It's just amazing. So other people are experiencing it different, but my experience with the Mandela effect has been identical in every reality. It's just, of course, seeing the differences and variations not only on the Earth but in history, in wars and things like that, and realizing that the outcome always remains the same. In fact, I'm working on a book right now called Quantum Battlefield. It's just amazing, you know, because in some realities, the D-Day landing, you know, here they had here's Normandy in this reality. In other realities, it was here, and it was on a coast that went straight, you know, north and south, and facing west. So the troops had to land and go straight east. Here they got to land, go south before they head east. So there's, you know, variations and differences in the battles simply because of the geographic differences. But yet the outcome always remains the same. It doesn't matter. Same with Nelson Mandela. It didn't matter if he was a martyr or a president. The geopolitical situation in South Africa remains the same in every reality, regardless. But it's just so interesting. And again, Nelson Mandela is a great namesake for this phenomenon, simply because we know that there's realities where he was executed or died for some reason, sickness or whatever, in prison. And yet other realities, like this reality, if he ascended to the presidency of South Africa after being liberated from prison, where he survived. But yet it didn't, so that also tells us that there could be realities where we don't exist either. Something may have happened to us. But it usually just happens to important people and things like that, because of, their rank in history, if you will, is going to vary. And we do see that with Nelson Mandela. So again, I just wanted to kind of go over the obvious differences. Good grief. It's just, there's so many. It'd take a couple hours to go over, not to mention what we're going through and getting sidetracked, kind of like I have been here. I wanted to go over more areas, but we can do that in the next video. So for now, we'll just call it at that. And I thank you for watching, and we'll talk at you later. Or what I used to say, we'll Google trot at you later. Love you.